temperature on the tarmac was 5 degrees below zero, but inside the $20 million Gulfstream G650, the atmosphere was about to get even colder. Captain Richard Sterling looked down his nose at the woman in seat 1A, a woman wearing a faded hoodie and running shoes. He didn't see the billionaire owner of the airline. He saw an obstacle. "I'm going to make this very simple," Sterling sneered, checking his Rolex. "This seat is for a VIP. You are clearly confused. Move to the jump seat in the back, or get off my plane." He thought he was clearing out the trash. He had no idea he was talking to the woman who signed his paychecks. And by the time the wheels touched down, his life would be dismantled, piece by piece. This is the story of how arrogance met its match on Christmas Eve. The wind at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey cut through clothing like a serrated knife. It was Christmas Eve, the busiest time of the year for private aviation, and the tarmac was a parking lot of aluminum and carbon fiber. Sleek bombardiers, Cessnas and Gulfstreams sat in rows, their engines humming as they prepared to whisk the 1% away to Aspen, St. Bart's, or Gstaad. Julianne Vance pulled her oversized grey scarf tighter around her neck as she stepped out of the black SUV. She didn't look like the people who usually boarded these planes. She wore no fur, no diamonds, and certainly no designer heels. She was dressed in comfortable black leggings, a generic university hoodie that had seen better days, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. To the untrained eye, she looked like an assistant, or perhaps an exhausted nanny sent ahead to prep the cabin. But Julianne wasn't a nanny. She was the majority shareholder of Vance Holdings, a conglomerate that had quietly acquired Aerolux charters exactly 24 hours ago. The acquisition had been hostile and swift. Aerolux was failing due to gross mismanagement and a reputation for prioritizing flash-over safety. Julianne had bought the debt, seized the assets, and was now the sole owner of a fleet of 40 jets. But nobody at Aerolux knew that yet. The paperwork had been filed in Delaware under a shell corporation, Titanium LLC, and the press release wasn't scheduled until after the holidays. She wanted to see the operation from the ground floor before she started firing executives. She wanted to know how they treated their lesser passengers. "Ma'am, are you sure you don't want me to carry your bag?" Her personal security detail, Marcus, asked quietly from the driver's seat. He was a mountain of a man, former SAS, but he knew better than to blow her cover. "No, Marcus," Julianne said, her breath clouding in the freezing air. "I need to do this alone. If they see you, they'll know I'm somebody. I need to be nobody today." "Copy that. I'll be tracking the flight. Landing in London, Heathrow in 7 hours. I'll have the car waiting on the tarmac." Julianne grabbed her duffel bag and walked toward the FBO, fixed base operator, entrance. The reception area of the private terminal was decked out in excessive Christmas decor, gold ribbons, a 12-foot tree, and the smell of expensive cinnamon candles. She bypassed the main desk. She had already received her digital clearance. She walked straight out to the flight line, where the Gulfstream G650ER, tail number N1180AL, was waiting. It was the crown jewel of the Aerolux fleet. As she climbed the air stairs, the cold wind whipped her hair across her face. She stepped into the cabin, expecting the warmth of hospitality. Instead, she found an empty cabin. The heating unit, or APU, hadn't been fully cranked up yet. The cabin temperature was lukewarm at best. She scanned the interior. It was undeniably beautiful. Cream leather seats, mahogany inlays, gold-plated fixtures. She walked to seat 1A, the prime spot on the aircraft, often referred to as the authority seat. She tossed her duffel bag into the overhead bin and sat down, pulling a beaten-up paperback book from her pocket. She was tired. It had been a long year of acquisitions and boardroom wars. All she wanted was to fly to London to see her grandmother, sleep for 6 hours, and forget that she managed billions of dollars in assets. But peace was not on the manifest today. From the cockpit, she heard heavy footsteps. A man emerged, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the galley mirror. He was tall, with silver fox hair styled to perfection, and a jawline that suggested he spent more time in front of a mirror than reading flight manuals. Captain Richard Sterling. Julianne knew his file. He was the chief pilot for Aerolux, highest paid, most requested by the divers of Hollywood, and according to the HR reports she had read last night, the source of 12 separate harassment complaints that had been swept under the rug by the previous CEO. Sterling turned and froze when he saw Julianne. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a welcome aboard. He blinked, his blue eyes narrowing as he scanned her hoodie, her messy hair, and her sneakers. "Excuse me," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, dripping with condescension. "Cleaning crew was supposed to be off the jet 10 minutes ago. We have a VIP boarding in 15. Julianne didn't look up from her book. She turned a page calmly. "I'm not the cleaning crew, Captain." Sterling took a step closer, his polished shoes crunching into the thick carpet. "Then you must be catering. Drop the sandwiches in the galley and get off. We're on a tight slot." Julianne finally looked up. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently very unimpressed. "I'm not catering. I'm the passenger." Sterling let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked around the empty cabin as if looking for a hidden camera. "You? You're the charter?" "Is there a problem?" Julianne asked. The charter was booked under a corporate account, Titanium LLC, Sterling said, reciting the name of her shell company. "They usually send executives. Suits. Not—" He gestured vaguely at her entire existence. "This. I am the executive sent by Titanium LLC," Julianne lied smoothly. "My name is Miss Vance, and I'd like a glass of water before we take off." Sterling stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. He was weighing his options. He was used to flying supermodels, oil tycoons, and politicians. He wasn't used to flying black women in hoodies who looked like they shopped at discount stores. "Right," Sterling said, his tone shifting from confusion to open irritation. "Ms. Vance, well, here's the situation. We have a slight complication with the manifest." "There is no complication," Julianne said. "I booked the jet. I'm here. We fly." "No," Sterling said, crossing his arms over his chest, the gold bars on his epaulets gleaming. "See, it's Christmas Eve, and on Christmas Eve, I have a special policy. I have a very important guest hitching a ride on this leg, a personal friend of the airline, and she prefers seat 1A. Julianne raised an eyebrow. "You're double booking a private charter? That's illegal, Captain." "It's not double booking," Sterling sneered. "It's accommodating a VIP. You're just a corporate rep. You don't need the comfort. So, here is what is going to happen. You're going to get up, and you're going to move to the jump seat in the rear, near the lavatory. It's perfectly safe, just less spacious." Julianne felt a spark of anger ignite in her chest, but she tamped it down. This was a test. She wanted to see how far he would go. "I paid $50,000 for this flight, Captain. I'm not sitting by the toilet." Sterling leaned down, placing his hands on the armrests of her chair, invading her personal space. "Listen to me, sweetheart. I don't care what your company paid. I run this plane. I am the captain. I say who sits where. Now move your ass, or I'll have security drag you off for interfering with a flight crew. And on Christmas Eve, you'll spend the night in a holding cell." The silence in the cabin was heavy, broken only by the distant whine of a jet engine starting up somewhere outside. Julianne looked at Sterling's hands on her armrests. He was trying to intimidate her physically. It was a classic bully tactic. "Remove your hands from my seat," Julianne said softly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a frequency of authority that usually made board members sweat. Sterling flinched, surprised by her tone, and straightened up. "You have an attitude problem. And you have a professionalism problem," she countered. "Who is this VIP that ranks higher than the paying customer?" Sterling smirked, checking his watch again. "Tiffany St. Clair. She's an influencer with 5 million followers and the niece of the Senator of New York. She brings prestige to Aerolux. You? You bring down the property value." Julianne mentally filed that name away. Tiffany St. Clair. She knew the type. Famous for being famous. Likely getting a free ride in exchange for tagging the airline on Instagram, a marketing strategy the previous CEO had implemented, and one Julianne intended to cancel immediately. "So," Julianne said, closing her book and placing it on her lap, "let me clarify. You are prioritizing a non-paying social media influencer over a corporate contract because you think I don't look the part?" "I'm prioritizing class," Sterling said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Look at you. You look like you wandered in from a shelter. It's bad for the brand image if someone looks through the window and sees you in the VIP seat. Now move. She'll be here in 2 minutes. And if I refuse?" Sterling's face hardened. The charm of the handsome pilot vanished, replaced by a cold, sneering malice. "If you refuse, I designate you as a security threat. I call the airport police. They haul you off. Your company loses the 50 grand, and you lose your job for causing a scene. Do you really want to explain to your boss at Titanium LLC that you got kicked off a private jet because you were too stubborn to sit in the back?" He paused, leaning in closer. "People like you should be grateful you're on a private jet at all. Usually, you're serving the drinks, not ordering them." There it was. The mask was off. Julianne took a deep breath. She could end this right now. She could pull out her phone, show him the digital deed to the company, and have him escorted off the premises within 5 minutes. But that was too easy. That was too quick. Captain Sterling needed a lesson that would stick. He needed to be humiliated in the air where he felt he was a god. "Fine," Julianne said, standing up. She picked up her book. "I'll move." Sterling grinned, a predatory expression of victory. "Smart girl. Back row. Keep the curtain closed. I don't want Tiffany to have to look at you." Julianne walked to the back of the plane. The G650ER was a long jet, divided into 3 zones. The front was the club suite, where she had been. The middle was a conference dining area. The rear was a divan and the lavatory. The jump seat he referred to was actually a crew rest seat, stiff and upright, right next to the bathroom door. She sat down, buckling the utilitarian strap. She was boiling inside, her blood rushing in her ears, but she kept her face impassive. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to Marcus. "Status: on board. Problem with pilot. Do not intervene yet. Let the flight proceed. I'm gathering evidence. Have legal ready on landing." Marcus replied instantly, "Copy. Tracking." Moments later, the cabin door opened again. A gust of freezing air rushed in, followed by the overwhelming scent of vanilla perfume and the high-pitched clacking of heels. "Oh my God, Richie, it is freezing out there!" Tiffany St. Clair burst into the cabin. She was a vision of chaotic luxury, a white faux fur coat that was too big, oversized sunglasses, despite it being night, and a tiny dog in a Louis Vuitton carrier. She was followed by a weary-looking flight attendant named Sarah, who was struggling with 3 massive pink suitcases. "Tiffany!" Sterling's voice changed instantly. It became warm, obsequious, almost groveling. "Welcome aboard, darling. So sorry about the cold. The APU is just kicking in. Here, let me take that dog carrier." "Richie, you promised me the good champagne," Tiffany whined, dropping into seat 1A, the seat Julianne had just vacated. She kicked her boots off, putting her socked feet up on the opposing leather seat. "I had such a stressful week. My nail tech cancelled on me, and Daddy is being so annoying about my credit limit." "We have the Dom Perignon on ice just for you," Sterling cooed. He glanced toward the back of the plane, checking to make sure the curtain was drawn, hiding Julianne. "We have the cabin all to ourselves, practically." "Practically?" Tiffany paused, pulling her sunglasses down. "What does that mean? Is someone else here?" Sterling lowered his voice, but in the small acoustic tube of the fuselage, Julianne heard every word. "Just a corporate nobody in the back. A stowaway, basically. Don't worry, she knows her place. She won't bother us. Treat her like she's invisible." "Ugh," Tiffany rolled her eyes. "I hate sharing. Make sure she doesn't use my bathroom." "Exclusively yours, babe," Sterling promised. He turned to Sarah, the flight attendant. "Sarah, get Miss St. Clair a glass of Dom, immediately, and then go tell the passenger in the back that she is restricted to water only. We aren't wasting the good stock on the help." Sarah, a young woman with a kind face who looked terrified of Sterling, nodded quickly. "Yes, Captain." As Sterling disappeared into the cockpit to start the engines, Sarah moved to the galley. She prepared the champagne with trembling hands. Then she filled a plastic cup with tap water and walked to the back of the plane. She pulled the curtain aside and saw Julianne sitting in the rigid crew seat. Sarah's face softened with pity. "Mom," Sarah whispered, looking over her shoulder to make sure Sterling wasn't watching. "I'm so sorry about this. Captain Sterling can be difficult." Julianne looked at the flight attendant. She saw fear in the girl's eyes. This wasn't the first time Sterling had bullied someone. "It's okay, Sarah," Julianne said gently, accepting the plastic cup. "It's not your fault." "He told me to give you water," Sarah whispered, reaching into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small bag of Lindt chocolates and a miniature bottle of whiskey she must have smuggled from the bar. She pressed them into Julianne's hand. "But it's Christmas Eve. Please, take this. Don't let him see." Julianne looked at the small act of kindness. It warmed her more than the heater ever could. "Thank you, Sarah. What is your full name?" "Sarah Jenkins, Ma'am." "Sarah Jenkins," Julianne repeated, memorizing it. "You're a good person. Hang in there. The flight is only 7 hours. "Buckle up," Sarah said nervously, as the engines roared to life, shaking the frame. "He drives fast when he's angry." As the plane taxied to the runway, Julianne unwrapped the chocolate. She stared at the back of the velvet curtain that separated her from the luxury she owned. "Enjoy the champagne, Captain," she thought. "It's going to be the most expensive drink you ever poured." The Gulfstream G650ER climbed out of Teterboro like a rocket. The power of the Rolls-Royce engines was undeniable, pushing them into the dark sky over the Atlantic. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign pinged off. From the back, Julianne could hear the party starting in the front. Tiffany was playing loud pop music on her phone, singing along badly. "Richie, come back here and have a drink with me," Tiffany yelled over the music. "I can't, babe, I'm flying," Sterling shouted back from the cockpit, though the door was open. "But the autopilot is on. I'll pop back in 10. Julianne needed to use the restroom. The coffee she'd had at the terminal was catching up with her. She unbuckled and stood up. The lavatory in the rear was right next to her, but Sterling had locked it. It was marked "Crew Only, Maintenance." She frowned. He had done that on purpose. That meant the only usable lavatory was the VIP one in the front, near the galley. Julianne pushed through the curtain. The main cabin was a mess. Tiffany had already spread her clothes across 3 seats. Her dog was running loose, yapping at the furniture. Sarah was on her hands and knees, cleaning up spilled champagne that Tiffany had knocked over. "Oops," Tiffany giggled. "Sarah, you missed a spot. Use your napkin." Julianne walked past them toward the front lavatory. Tiffany stopped singing. She pulled her sunglasses down and stared at Julianne. Excuse me? Where are you going?" "Restroom," Julianne said briefly, not stopping. "No, no, no." Tiffany stood up, blocking the aisle. She was wearing a silk pajama set that probably cost more than a Honda Civic. "Richie said you aren't allowed up here. This is my zone. Use the bucket in the back or whatever." "The rear lavatory is locked," Julianne said, keeping her voice calm. "I need to use this one." "Richie!" Tiffany screamed. "The stowaway is invading my personal space." Captain Sterling emerged from the cockpit instantly, as if he had been waiting for a reason to yell. He stormed into the cabin, his face flushed. "I told you to stay in your seat," Sterling barked, pointing a finger in Julianne's face. "You locked the rear lavatory," Julianne said. "I have basic human needs, Captain. Unless you want me to relieve myself on your carpet, I am using this restroom." Sterling grabbed Julianne's arm. His grip was tight, painful. "Don't you touch me," Julianne said. Her voice dropped to a glacial temperature. "Let go of my arm. Now." There was something in her eyes, a cold, hard steel that made Sterling hesitate. He let go, but he stepped into her path, blocking the bathroom door. "You are disrupting the flight," Sterling hissed. "You are upsetting the VIP. You know what? I should divert. I should land in Nova Scotia and kick you off right now into the snow." "Do it," Julianne challenged him. "Land the plane, I dare you." Sterling laughed nervously. He was a bully, but he was also lazy. Landing and filing the paperwork for a diversion was too much work. "You're lucky I want to get to London for Christmas dinner," Sterling spat. "Use the bathroom, then get back to your cage. And if I hear one more word from you, I will have you blacklisted from every charter company in America. I know people. I can make sure you never fly anything other than Greyhound again." Julianne stepped past him, brushing her shoulder against his uniform. She entered the lavish bathroom, complete with gold faucets and heated floors. She looked at herself in the mirror. She washed her hands slowly. She took out her phone. She had recorded the audio of the last exchange. She exited the bathroom. Sterling and Tiffany were whispering, giggling as they looked at her. "She looks like a librarian who got lost," Tiffany laughed loudly. "More like a janitor," Sterling added. Julianne stopped in the middle of the aisle. She looked at the flight management system screen mounted on the wall. They were 2 hours out from London. "Captain," Julianne said. Sterling groaned. "What now?" "I'd like to ask you a question about the aircraft," she said. "The G650ER. Who owns it?" Sterling rolled his eyes. "It's owned by Aerolux, my company." "Why? You want to buy a toy model?" "No," Julianne said. "I mean, who owns Aerolux? I heard the company was sold yesterday." Sterling froze. The color drained slightly from his face. "Rumors. Fake news. We are privately held." "Actually," Julianne said, leaning against the bulkhead, crossing her arms, "I read in the Financial Times that Vance Holdings acquired the controlling stake. Do you know who the CEO of Vance Holdings is?" "Some suit," Sterling waved his hand dismissively. "Some old white guy in a boardroom in New York. Doesn't concern me. I'm the talent. Whoever owns it needs me." "The CEO isn't an old white guy," Julianne said. "Her name is Julianne Vance, and she's known for being very particular about her staff." Sterling narrowed his eyes. "How do you know that?" "I read," Julianne said simply. "You should try it sometime. It might save your career." She turned and walked back to the economy jump seat, closing the curtain behind her. Sterling stared at the curtain for a moment, a flicker of unease in his gut. But then Tiffany held out her empty glass. "Richie, more bubbles." The unease vanished. "Coming, babe," he said, turning his back on his fate. The Atlantic Ocean at night is a void. From 45,000 feet, there is no horizon, no distinction between the black water and the black sky, save for the occasional shimmer of a star fighting through the cloud layers. The Gulf Stream G50ER, a masterpiece of aeronautical engineering, sliced through this void at Mach 090, nearing the speed of sound. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was bifurcated. In the rear, in the stiff, upright crew seat, Julianne sat in meditative silence. She had finished the small chocolate Sarah had given her, and was now reviewing the aircraft's technical logs on her phone, which she had accessed remotely via the onboard Wi-Fi. She noted discrepancies. The fuel consumption was higher than it should be for this load. The maintenance logs showed a deferred repair on the weather radar system, a repair that should have been mandatory before a transatlantic crossing in winter. Julianne frowned. He's flying blind, she realized, or close to it. In the front of the cabin, the party was in full swing. The sound of clinking glass and raucous laughter drifted back through the curtain. Captain Sterling had evidently decided that the autopilot was capable enough to handle the aircraft while he entertained his VIP. "So, Richie," Tiffany's voice was slurred, loud enough to penetrate the engine hum. "When we land, can you get me through customs fast? I have a headache, and I don't want to deal with, lines." "Babe, with me, you don't do lines," Sterling bragged. "I know the guys at Farnborough. We'll breeze through. I'll stamp your passport myself if I have to." Julianne shook her head. That was a federal offense, but add it to the list. Suddenly, the plane lurched. It wasn't a gentle bump. It was a violent, stomach-churning drop. The G650 fell 300 feet in a split second, hitting a pocket of clear air turbulence, CAT, that the faulty radar hadn't picked up. In the back, Julianne braced herself, her hands gripping the armrests. She knew to expect this. She had felt the subtle vibration in the floorboard seconds before. In the front, chaos erupted. There was the sound of shattering glass. A scream, high-pitched and terrified, tore through the cabin. "My dress, my God, my dress!" Tiffany shrieked. The plane banked hard to the left, the autopilot disengaging with a loud cavalry charge alarm tone, the nose pitched down. Sterling, who had been standing in the aisle holding a bottle of champagne, was thrown off balance. He slammed into the bulkhead with a sickening thud. "Get to the cockpit!" Julianne shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. She unbuckled her seatbelt instantly. This wasn't a time for pettiness. This was a matter of survival. Sterling scrambled to his feet, looking dazed. His perfect hair was mussed, and red wine, or maybe blood, stained his white shirt. He stumbled toward the cockpit, fighting gravity as the plane shuddered violently. "Richie, do something!" Tiffany screamed, clutching her dog, which was howling. The plane shook, as if a giant hand were rattling it. The overhead bins rattled ominously. Sarah, the flight attendant, was strapped into her jump seat in the galley, her face pale as a sheet, eyes squeezed shut in prayer. Julianne moved. She didn't stumble. She walked with a low center of gravity, surfing the turbulence. She reached the cockpit door just as Sterling threw himself into the pilot's seat. "What are you doing? Get out!" Sterling yelled, grabbing the yoke. "You're stalling," Julianne said calmly, standing in the doorway. She looked at the primary flight display. "Airspeed is bleeding off. Pitch down, Captain. You're trying to pull up too hard." "I know how to fly my plane!" Sterling roared, pulling back on the yoke. The stall warning blared, a mechanical voice shouting, "Stall! Stall!" The stick shaker activated, vibrating the controls violently. "You're going to kill us," Julianne said. She didn't scream. She stated it as a fact. "Push the nose down. Regain airspeed. You are in a high-altitude stall." Sterling was freezing up. It was a phenomenon known as startle factor. He had been relaxed, drinking, flirting, and suddenly he was fighting for his life. His brain couldn't catch up. He kept pulling back, trying to climb away from the ground, which was the exact wrong instinct. Julianne stepped into the cockpit. She didn't touch the controls. That would be illegal and dangerous. But she leaned close to his ear, her voice an anchor in the storm. "Richard," she said, using his first name, commanding his attention. "Listen to me. Lower the nose. 5 degrees. Throttle to 80%. Do it now." Something in her tone pierced through his panic. It was the voice of absolute command. Sterling mechanically obeyed. He pushed the yoke forward. The nose of the jet dipped. The sickening feeling of falling intensified for a moment, and Tiffany screamed again from the cabin. But then, the airspeed indicator began to climb. The stall warning silenced. The wings bit into the air again, finding lift. "Level off," Julianne ordered. Sterling pulled back gently. The horizon line on the screen stabilized. The turbulence was still rough, battering the fuselage, but they were flying again. Sterling was hyperventilating. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He stared at the instruments, his hands white-knuckle tight on the yoke. "Engage the autopilot," Julianne said. "Heading 270. Get us out of this cell." Sterling engaged the autopilot. The plane corrected itself, the ride smoothing out as the computer took over the micro-adjustments. Silence returned to the cockpit, save for the heavy breathing of the captain. Sterling turned his head slowly to look at Julianne. She was standing there in her hoodie and leggings, looking at him with an expression of profound disappointment. "Who are you?" Sterling whispered. His voice trembled. He had just realized that the janitor knew more about recovery from a high-altitude stall than he did in his intoxicated state. "I told you," Julianne said coolly. "I'm the passenger, and right now, I'm the only reason you aren't a debris field in the Atlantic." She turned to leave the cockpit. "Wait," Sterling said, the arrogance creeping back in as his heart rate slowed. The fear was replaced by a sudden, sharp realization of liability. "You can't tell anyone about this." Julianne stopped. "Excuse me?" "The stall," Sterling said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "The turbulence. Me being out of the seat. If the FAA or the CAA hears about this, I lose my license." "You should lose your license," Julianne said. "You were drinking. You deferred a radar repair. You nearly killed 4 people." Sterling unbuckled and stood up, blocking the cockpit door. The cabin was narrow. He loomed over her. "Listen to me, you little snitch," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "Nobody's going to believe you. I'll write it up as severe, unexpected turbulence. Mechanical glitch. I'm a hero for saving the plane. You? You're just a frightened passenger who doesn't know what she's talking about." "Is that the story?" Julianne asked. "That's the truth," Sterling said menacingly. "And if you open your mouth, I will say you tried to breach the cockpit, that you interfered with the flight crew. That's a federal crime. 20 years in prison. Your word against the captain's." He poked a finger into her shoulder. "So you go back to your little seat by the toilet. You sit down. And when we land, you get off and you disappear. Do we understand each other?" Julianne looked at his finger on her shoulder. She looked at his desperate, angry eyes. She saw a man who had gotten away with everything his whole life and thought tonight would be no different. "We understand each other perfectly, Captain," Julianne said. She pushed past him and walked back into the cabin. Tiffany was sobbing, clutching a champagne bottle. "My Gucci dress is ruined. It's soaked. Richie, you owe me a new dress." Sarah was cleaning up broken glass, weeping silently. Julianne knelt beside Sarah. "Are you hurt?" "No, Mom," Sarah sniffled. "Just scared." "It's over now," Julianne said, patting her hand. "Clean this up, then go sit down and buckle in. I don't want you working for the rest of the flight." "But the captain—" "I don't care what the captain says," Julianne said firmly. "Sit down. That's an order." Sarah looked at Julianne, confused by the authority radiating from this woman in sneakers, but she nodded and sat down. Julianne returned to the rear jump seat. She pulled the curtain shut. She took out her phone. She opened a secure app. Message to Marcus. "Incident on board. Pilot error. Near stall. Pilot threatened me. Prepare the welcoming committee at Farnborough. Call the CAA. Call the police. And get the board of directors on a conference line. I want them listening when I land." Marcus replied, "Roger that, boss. It's all arranged. We are watching the telemetry. We saw the drop." "Are you okay?" Julianne typed back, "I'm fine." But Captain Sterling is about to have a very bad Christmas. The remaining 3 hours of the flight were a study in tension. The silence in the cabin was brittle. Tiffany had passed out, likely from a combination of fear and too much Dom Perignon, sprawled across the divan in the VIP section. Captain Sterling stayed locked in the cockpit, presumably trying to concoct a falsified flight log that would explain the terrifying telemetry data the black box had surely recorded. Julianne didn't sleep. She spent the time drafting a legal document on her phone. It was a termination notice. As the sun began to hint at rising in the east, painting the clouds in bruised purples and greys, the coastline of England appeared on the navigation screens. They were beginning their descent into Farnborough Airport, the exclusive hub for private aviation just outside of London. The intercom crackled. "Flight attendants, prepare for landing," Sterling's voice came over the speaker. He sounded composed, fake, the hero pilot persona back in place. "Ladies, we'll be on the ground in 20 minutes. Weather in London is brisk, 30 degrees. I'll have the cars brought right up to the plane steps." Julianne tightened her seatbelt. She checked her appearance in the reflection of the window. Her hoodie was wrinkled. Her hair was messy. She looked exhausted. Perfect. The landing gear deployed with a heavy clunk. The flaps whirred. The G-X-Y-Tor swooped down over the English countryside, the green fields dusted with frost. Sterling greased the landing. It was smooth, professional, a stark contrast to the chaos of 3 hours ago. He was showing off, trying to prove he was in control. The jet taxied off the main runway, heading toward the private hangar area. Usually, customs agents would board the plane, or the passengers would be driven to a small terminal. But Julianne saw through the window that they were being directed to a remote stand, far away from the prying eyes of the main terminal. There were 4 vehicles waiting on the tarmac, 2 black Range Rovers, 1 police cruiser, and a sleek silver Bentley with a driver standing at attention. Sterling taxied the jet to a halt. The engines whined down, spinning into silence. The fasten seatbelt sign turned off. Sterling burst out of the cockpit, his jacket buttoned, his hat on straight. He looked impeccable, hiding the rot beneath the uniform. "Ladies," he announced, clapping his hands. "Welcome to London. Tiffany, wake up, sweetheart. Your chariot awaits." Tiffany groaned, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Ugh, my head. Richie, carry my bag." "Of course," Sterling said. He looked toward the back of the plane. He saw Julianne standing up, shouldering her duffel bag. He walked over to her, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "Remember what I said. You walk down those stairs, you keep your head down, and you get in whatever Uber your cheap company sent for you. Not a word about the flight, or I ruin you." "After you, Captain," Julianne said, gesturing to the door. "I insist." Sarah opened the cabin door. The cold English air rushed in, smelling of jet fuel and damp earth. The air stairs deployed automatically. Sterling stepped out first, waving like a celebrity. Tiffany followed, stumbling slightly in her heels, holding her dog. Sarah waited by the door, head bowed. Julianne stepped out last. As she reached the top of the stairs, she saw the tableau on the tarmac. Sterling was already at the bottom, walking toward the silver Bentley with a wide grin. He extended his hand toward the man standing beside the car. "Good morning," Sterling boomed. "Captain Richard Sterling here. I assume this beauty is for Ms. St. Clair." The man beside the Bentley didn't smile. He was an older gentleman, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. He ignored Sterling's hand. "Captain Sterling," the man said, his voice clipped and British. "I am afraid you are mistaken. The Bentley is for the owner of the aircraft." Sterling blinked, confused. "The owner?" No, the owner is a corporation. This is a charter. The VIP is right here." He gestured to Tiffany, who was shivering in her fur coat. "Ms. St. Clair is a passenger," the man said. He looked up the stairs, past Sterling, past Tiffany. His eyes locked onto Julianne. The man stood up straighter. The two large men in the black Range Rovers stepped out. They were security. They weren't looking at Tiffany. They were looking at Julianne. "Miss Vance," the man by the Bentley called out, his voice carrying clearly across the tarmac. "Welcome to London, madam. I trust the flight was illuminating?" Sterling froze. He turned slowly to look back at the air stairs. Julianne stood there, framed by the fuselage of the $20 million jet. She didn't look like a stowaway anymore. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. She walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time. The sound of her sneakers on the metal was the only sound in the airfield. She reached the bottom and walked right past Tiffany, who was looking between the Bentley and Julianne with her mouth open. Julianne stopped in front of Sterling. "Captain Sterling," Julianne said, "allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Julianne Vance. I am the CEO of Vance Holdings." She pointed to the jet behind her. "And as of yesterday morning, I own Aerolux. I own this plane. I own the fuel in its wings. And I own the uniform you are wearing." Sterling's face went the color of curdled milk. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "You," he stammered. "You but the hoodie?" "I wanted to see how my employees treat the people they think don't matter," Julianne said. Her voice was ice. "And I saw. You humiliated a paying customer. You prioritized a non-paying friend. You drank alcohol while in command of a flight. You ignored safety protocols. You almost stalled my aircraft. And then you threatened the owner of the company." "Miss Vance," Sterling gasped, sweat instantly breaking out on his forehead, despite the cold. "Please, it was a misunderstanding. I didn't know. I thought—" "You thought I was weak," Julianne said. "You thought I was poor. And because of that, you thought I wasn't human." She turned to the man in the charcoal suit. "Mr. Henderson, are the police ready?" "Yes, madam," Mr. Henderson said. He signaled to the police cruiser. Two officers stepped out. "Police!" Sterling squeaked. "Wait, you can't— For what?" "Endangerment of life," Julianne listed. "Operating an aircraft under the influence, harassment, and attempting to coerce a witness. The aviation authorities are already processing the flight data. You'll be lucky if you only lose your license, Captain. I'm pressing for jail time." "Tiffany!" Sterling shouted, turning to the influencer. Tell them I saved us." Tiffany looked at the police. She looked at Julianne, who was clearly the most powerful person on the tarmac. Tiffany was shallow, but she wasn't stupid. She knew where the power lay. "I don't know," Tiffany said, pulling her fur coat tighter. "He was drinking champagne, Julianne. I saw him. And he was really mean to you. I felt so unsafe." Sterling looked at her, betrayed. "You drank it with me." "I'm a passenger," Tiffany yelled. "You're the pilot." Julianne turned to the police officers. "Take him." "No, wait! Miss Vance!" Sterling shouted as the officers grabbed his arms. "I'm the best pilot you have. You need me." "I don't need pilots who judge people by their shoes, Richard," Julianne said calmly. "Goodbye." As they dragged Sterling away, kicking and screaming toward the cruiser, Julianne turned to Sarah, the flight attendant, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs, trembling, holding her small carry-on. Sarah looked terrified. She thought she was next. Julianne smiled warmly. "Sarah Jenkins, right?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah whispered. "You gave me chocolate when you thought I was nobody," Julianne said. "You treated me with kindness when your boss told you to treat me like trash. That is the kind of leadership I need." Julianne turned to Mr. Henderson. "Give Sarah a week of paid leave. When she comes back, she's not a flight attendant anymore. Make her the head of cabin services for the entire fleet. I want her training every single crew member on how to treat passengers." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "Miss Vance, Thank you. You earned it," Julianne said. Finally, Julianne turned to Tiffany. Tiffany put on her best smile. "So, Julianne, I guess we got off on the wrong foot. But, you know, us girls have to stick together. Are we still good for the ride into London?" Julianne looked at the Bentley. Then she looked at the two black Range Rovers. "Mr. Henderson," Julianne said, "is there a bus stop near the airport?" "Yes, madam, about 2 miles down the road." "Excellent," Julianne said to Tiffany. "You can walk." "Walk!" Tiffany shrieked. "In these heels it's freezing." "You should have thought about that before you told me to use a bucket," Julianne said. She climbed into the back of the Bentley. The heated leather seat welcomed her. "Drive," she said. As the Bentley pulled away, Julianne watched through the rear window. She saw Tiffany standing on the tarmac, shivering, her luggage piled around her, while Sarah was ushered into one of the luxury Range Rovers. The karma had been served. Cold, hard, and undeniable. The holding cell at the local constabulary was cold, but Captain Richard Sterling didn't stay there long. By 10 a.m. on Christmas morning, he was out on bail, sitting in a black taxi with Arthur Pendleton, a solicitor known in London aviation circles as the Viper. "We strike first," Pendleton hissed, checking his phone. "We need a narrative that kills her credibility before she can file formal charges. She's a billionaire heiress. Fine, we paint her as a spoiled brat. You're the veteran hero. She's the drunk passenger who tried to hijack the cockpit." "Can we sell that?" Sterling asked, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "In the court of public opinion? Absolutely. By the time Julianne arrived at her grandmother's estate in Kensington, the damage was already done. She had hoped for a quiet Christmas, but as she walked through the door, Marcus handed her a tablet with a grim expression. "You need to see this, boss." The headline from the Daily Truth screamed, "Billionaire brat hijacks cockpit. Flight horror on Christmas Eve." The article was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed Julianne was intoxicated and that Captain Sterling had heroically wrestled control of the aircraft from her during a mechanical failure. "The board of directors is panicking," Marcus warned. "They're holding an emergency session at the Shard in 1 hour. They want to reinstate Sterling to save the stock price. They think dumping you is the safest move." Julianne's eyes hardened. "Get the car. We're going to the office. and get me the decrypted audio from the cockpit voice recorder. I want it ready to play by the time I walk into that room." The conference room on the 45th floor of the Shard offered a panoramic view of London, but the atmosphere inside was suffocating. 10 board members, led by the bloated chairman, Lord Harrington, sat around the glass table. They looked nervous. When Julianne walked in, still wearing her travel-worn hoodie and leggings, the silence was absolute. "Miss Vance," Harrington said, not bothering to stand. "We were expecting you to dial in." "I prefer to look people in the eye when they try to stab me in the back," Julianne said, remaining standing at the head of the table. "Nobody is stabbing you," Harrington lied, smoothing his silk tie. "We are managing a crisis. We have a statement from Captain Sterling claiming you were abusive and reckless. We also have a witness, Tiffany St. Clair, prepared to sign an affidavit supporting him. It looks bad, Julianne. We suggest you step down as CEO. Let us reinstate the captain to calm the investors." "You want to reinstate a pilot who flew drunk?" Julianne asked quietly. "Allegedly drunk," Pendleton interjected from the corner, smiling smugly. "Without a breathalyzer, it's hearsay. The narrative is that he saved the plane. The truth is irrelevant." "The truth is the only thing that matters," Julianne said. She pulled out her phone and placed it in the center of the table. "Marcus, play the recording." "What is this?" Harrington demanded. "The cockpit voice recorder," Julianne said coldly. "The black box." Static hissed from the speaker, followed by the undeniable sound of Captain Sterling's voice, slurred, aggressive, and intoxicated. "I don't care what your company paid. Move your ass, or I'll have security drag you off." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Then came the terrifying sounds of the stall, the mechanical alarm screaming, and Sterling's hyperventilating panic. "Get out! I know how to fly my plane!" And then Julianne's voice cut through the chaos, calm, authoritative, commanding him to lower the nose and save their lives. The recording ended with Sterling's desperate attempt at blackmail. "If you open your mouth, I will say you tried to breach the cockpit." The silence in the boardroom was terrified. Pendleton's smug smile had vanished. He looked pale. "That," Julianne said, pointing to the phone, "is fraud, endangerment, and blackmail." She looked at Harrington. "You assumed the white man in the uniform was the hero, and the black woman in the hoodie was the liability. That is not a business mistake, Lord Harrington. That is a cultural rot." She tapped the table. "I am not stepping down. I am exercising my rights as the majority shareholder. I am dissolving this board for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. You are all fired." "You can't do that!" Harrington shouted, standing up. "I own 51%, Julianne said, her voice like ice. "I can do whatever I want. Security will escort you out. Do not take your laptops. Get out." The doors opened, and Marcus stepped in with 4 security guards. As the defeated board members shuffled out, Julianne turned to the window, looking out at the grey London rain. She had cleaned the boardroom. Now it was time to finish the pilot. The fallout was nuclear, with the board of directors removed and the cockpit voice recorder released to the Civil Aviation Authority. Captain Richard Sterling's defense crumbled like wet cake. The evidence of his intoxication and recklessness was undeniable. Even Tiffany St. Clair, the so-called VIP, saw the winds changing. Realizing that lying to federal investigators would land her in prison and destroy her influencer career, she flipped. She posted a tearful video on social media, claiming she was manipulated by Sterling and confirming he had been drinking heavily. Her testimony sealed Sterling's fate. The trial at the Old Bailey was swift. Julianne attended the final sentencing, wearing a tailored navy suit that screamed power. a stark contrast to the hoodie she had worn on that fateful flight. She sat in the gallery, her face impassive, as the judge delivered the verdict. "Richard Sterling," the judge intoned, looking down from the bench. "You abused a position of supreme trust to bully a passenger and endanger lives. This court sentences you to 3 years in prison, followed by a lifetime ban from holding a pilot's license." Sterling looked back at the gallery, locking eyes with Julianne. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, hollow defeat. He didn't say a word. As the bailiffs led him down to the cells, Julianne didn't smile or gloat. She simply watched him disappear. The scales had been righted. Christmas Eve. The tarmac at Teterboro Airport was freezing again, just like it had been a year ago. But this time, the Gulfstream G150ER looked different. The flashy gold stripes of Aerolux were gone, replaced by a sleek, matte navy livery with silver accents. The tail bore the new company logo, Vance Aviation. Julianne walked up the air stairs, wrapped in a thick wool coat, but still wearing her favorite comfortable sneakers. Waiting for her at the door was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was no longer the terrified girl hiding in the galley. She was now the head of cabin services, wearing a crisp, modern uniform and radiating confidence. "Welcome aboard, Miss Vance," Sarah beamed. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Sarah," Julianne smiled warmly. "How is the crew?" "Ready for London, and the captain is waiting to brief you." A woman stepped out of the cockpit. She was black, with 4 gold stripes on her epaulets, and a calm, commanding presence. This was Captain Reynolds, the new chief pilot Julianne had headhunted from British Airways. "Miss Vance," Captain Reynolds nodded respectfully. "We have a smooth flight plan filed. We'll be in London in 6 hours." "Thank you, Captain," Julianne said. "I trust your judgment implicitly." Julianne walked into the cabin, which smelled of fresh eucalyptus and expensive leather. She bypassed seat 1A, the seat where the war had started, and sat at the conference table. She opened her laptop, watching Sarah efficiently manage the cabin. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful hum that vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of progress. As the jet accelerated and lifted off into the night sky, leaving the frozen tarmac behind, Julianne thought about Richard Sterling sitting in a cell in Wandsworth Prison. She realized that the universe had a way of correcting itself, but sometimes it needed a little push. She had cleaned house, not just for revenge, but to build something better from the ashes. Julianne took a sip of sparkling water and looked out at the stars. She was flying, and this time the sky truly belonged to her. And that is the story of how one pilot's arrogance cost him absolutely everything. It's a powerful reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a passenger by their hoodie. Sterling thought his uniform gave him the right to bully, but he forgot the golden rule of service. Respect everyone, because you never know who you're talking to. Julianne didn't just win. She cleaned house and built something better from the ashes. That is true boss energy. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about arrogant people getting exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. I've got a crazy story coming next week about a landlord who tried to evict a tenant, only to find out the tenant owned the building. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay humble.